So people who rely on, let's say, more affordable ultra processed foods, and that's really the whole justification behind the whole food industry is
Yes.
we're trying to make it affordable and accessible, and something sits on a shelf for 2 years and doesn't go bad versus fruits that go bad in a week.
Right?
And yeah, and they're right. It's true. It really does last longer and it is a bit cheaper. But the effect in your body isn't cheaper. You have to go to more doctors.
Mm-mm.
You have to spend more money on appointments, take time off work when you get sick. You have to spend money on your medication. You have to try to deal with insurance companies. And just like you said, that the financial difference actually isn't as big as you think when you do the math. Welcome to the Holistic Life Navigation Channel. I'm your host, Luis Mujica. I'm a somatic educator and nutritionist, and I'm here to explore every aspect of life through the lens of somatic psychology, nutrition, and philosophy. Let's dive in. Okay, so many people have been talking about the new food pyramid, and I have been in my mind just singing Missy Elliott. They took it, they put that thing down, they flipped it and reversed it. And if I don't sing it, I don't owe her royalties. So I'm speaking it. I can't afford her royalties. But I was just laughing about this because what I want to go through with I have Camille here from HLN. What I want to go through with Camille is the backlash against the change because it happens to come from an administration a lot of us don't like. But before, if I think if this is apolitical, most people I know would be so thrilled about this. But because it's coming from the Trump administration, and really not from Trump at all, but RFK Jr., who's part of his administration, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance around it, which we love talking about and working with. So I want to have a blend of just going over how bias can get in the way of even serving yourself in a positive way. Like maybe you agree with somebody who you don't like otherwise. How is that okay? And how can that benefit you, especially in this case with food? But I also want to break down everything around this pyramid because I don't think people really understand it. And it's literally, I looked at the guidelines and I'll read them again, with us here recorded. It's very close to the quiet diet. So it's kind of interesting as we get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, First thing I'll say, and I want to hear you. I got a lot of flack online. I didn't do a post, but I did a stories on Instagram just saying literally what you and I were texting about, word for word. You don't have to like the administration or even RFK Jr. to know this makes sense. And I just said it. And I said, for years, I have been saying this exact same thing for over 20 years. And I have seen implementing these foods into people's diet have profound health benefits. So it's the first time in my life I can recall any government agency actually presencing food. I've never seen this before. It's always been medication to deal with the food, but no one's ever talked about just the food. The closest, and again, it was a blip in my mind. So if it was bigger, I was just on the fringe and wasn't watching the news at the time. But the closest was Michelle Obama trying to give vegetables in school lunches, if I remember correctly. And that's the last thing I remember in my lifetime where people were talking about whole food or real food. So a lot of people were upset with me because they said, how dare you do this? The administration sucks. How can you be on their side? That's the first thing I got. And the second thing I got was, of all people, you're the bean guy. They hate beans. That means they hate you. This is like, so we're going to go through some of these things, but what landed for you when you saw it, and how are you feeling your own cognitive dissonance around definitely you not supporting this administration at all, but
Yeah.
can support this decision? Suss that out for us.
Yeah, like when it probably just came across the image, like for a lot of people, first thing I saw was the new pyramid and it caught my attention because it was flipped upside down. And I was just looking at it before I even got into the actual PDF of the guidelines. I was like, yeah, this makes sense to me. Like I think we can all take a pause and think about the 1992 food pyramid, where the base of it was grains. And I'm not here to say that grains are bad, but that's the base of even before fruits and vegetables. I think we can all agree, like, okay, yeah, that's not quite right. And we've made some changes since then. Speaking of Michelle Obama in 2011, she introduced My Plate, where it shifted the proportions a bit. But the reaction I saw from a lot of people, which I found interesting, to your point, around, they're demonizing beans, or they're putting saturated fat, particularly milk and red meat, at the forefront. And in one particular post, I saw how they said, most people read left to right, top to bottom. The fact that in the top rightmost corner is red meat, you're sending a signal that that's the most important thing. And I was like, wow, we're
That's some
reading a
creativity.
lot into this. And when you go through the actual PDF itself, at least for me, I don't find a downgrading of non-animal protein products. It's a either or, in my opinion. Now, if I were to make my own triangle, would I probably do it a little slightly differently? Would I make the base fruits and vegetables and then the second tier meat protein? Yeah, that's probably what I would do. But in looking at it, I felt that this particular take on it was really trying to well, I mean, even to use RFK's word, in the war on fat, particularly saturated fat, that isn't the end all be all to the obese, not just the obesity epidemic, but the health epidemic we're experiencing in the United States. And I think a lot of people took that to mean you're saying fuck plants, and that's just not what I took away from it.
Yeah. You know, one thing I wanted to say on my plate, because someone was very angry with me that I didn't herald my plate, which I didn't even have Instagram when my plate came out, so that's why I didn't herald it, just to be
Mhm.
clear. But I think what's interesting to me is every dietitian I've ever met, every nursing home I've ever visited or been part of, because both my grandparents and my uncle were in nursing homes, none of those dietitians knew my plate. I never heard one person working from my plate. Everyone was still
Really?
working from the 1991, is that food pyramid?
92, yeah.
1992? Yeah,
Mhm.
everyone was still working off the food pyramid.
Really?
Yes. And
Wow.
I wanted to say that publicly because I didn't want to go, I don't go back and forth on Instagram. What people say I take
Right.
and I consider, then I do it on here. I don't do it anywhere. I just consider it. But yeah, I don't know one person that I personally met that says I use my plate as the
Yeah.
standard. Every dietitian was still going with 6 to 11 servings, everybody,
Servings.
and
Mhm.
Camille's being generous. It doesn't say grains. I'm going to say what it says:
Yeah.
bread, rice, cereal, pasta. Okay, we have to understand this. If it said millet, if it said
Hmm.
amaranth, if it said legumes, we would not be having this conversation.
Right.
But it says bread, rice, cereal, pasta. And I want people to understand those are made from grains. Even the rice that's pictured in the food pyramid is white rice, so it's a processed rice. But the
Correct.
bread, cereal, pasta made from grains, and it will say made with whole grains because it once was a whole grain. But these are products from huge billion-dollar companies. And I think what's important, this is interesting, is where your history comes in, Mr. Morris. Philip Morris, that was part of the tobacco industry, when they were no longer allowed to advertise anything, any kind of cigarettes, even smoke-free ads, I think in 1986 or something, you couldn't even hold a cigarette whether you're smoking or not.
Mhm.
When that was banned, interestingly enough, they around the same time bought these food companies. They bought Kraft Foods, they bought General Foods. Now, everyone who knows Kraft and General Foods knows these are cereal, mac and cheese companies. These are, I think, maybe even Uncle Ben's is part of Kraft. It's a
Mhm.
lot of refined carbohydrates in boxes. So the tobacco companies bought these food companies, and then for the next 4 or 5 years, they lobbied with lots of money for the USDA to include that as the base of the pyramid in 1992. So from 1992 until literally just last year, I've talked to people that still use the old food pyramid. What is that, 20, 30 years? 30 years. We're
Mhm.
talking. People have been centering refined carbohydrates as a source of fiber and whole grains, and they're not the same thing. So when you
Yes.
say a health epidemic, the health epidemic, whether it's diabetes, high cholesterol, obesity, cognitive decline, anxiety, all that, in my opinion, comes from excessive amounts of glucose. And I want people to understand that because just like you said, in the 80s, fat started being demonized and grain started being worshipped because these companies took over and they were able to, I mean, millions of dollars of advertising will do that. And then when you lobby the government, you have a food pyramid that then teaches dietitians, then you systemically have this way of getting grains into people's diets and they think they're helping themselves. They
Oh,
think, right,
absolutely.
they think if fat comes down and grains go up, I'm going to be healthy. You
I'm
eat
I'm a
brown rice.
product of that. Yeah.
Me too. So
Yeah.
tell me how you're a product of it, because I
I,
definitely am.
so I've said on several podcasts, I've been fat all my life, and I distinctly remember even being like in like 8 years old or 9 years old, and like, okay, we're going to get our life together, and we're going to eat healthy, which means we're going to eat toast, we're going to eat pop.
I relate so hard as I laugh because I
We're gonna eat we're gonna eat
oh my
popcorn. And my mom was like, yes, Camille, we're gonna get healthy. We're gonna eat toast and pop. And I did it. And then we were still like, well, why is Camille still overweight? Like we're
Mhm.
decreasing all this animal product, all this fat. And when we were like, oh, and we weren't putting jelly on the toast. So even though sugar wasn't the focus, it was just toast and butter. And that's when we said, the butter, I know what. Margarine. Margin is the answer. So and then so I mean I did like for decades. I mean, and then even when I got into college, I was like, okay, this is when we're really gonna get our shit together. We're gonna stick with even though it's not working, we're gonna stick with toast and popcorn and ramen. I mean, that's all I'm gonna eat. And
And
then
margarine.
clearly I'm going to lose weight. And it just didn't work. But yet that is what we're taught because um and this sort of segues to some other things I'm seeing in people talking about the prominence of saturated fat on the new pyramid is that well the science doesn't support saturated fat. The science shows that saturated fat leads to XYZ. Let's also keep in mind science is what led to the 1992 pyramid. There was some science that said very crudely and basically fat makes you fat. Now we know today that that's not true, but there was some science at the time that could back that up. And you can
Mhm.
make any data say what you want to say. I know
That's right.
personally, but I don't even know exactly where I was going with all that. But yeah, I'll pause there.
I'm with you the whole way. I mean, I a strong hard relate. I remember at 11, 12, and 13, I was in Weight Watchers, and all my meals were the 6 to 11 foods. Like literally
Mhm.
every single meal, I probably had 12. I probably had 12 servings of carbohydrates. I thought I was going to be extra healthy. I'm like, I'm going to exceed the limits. I'm going to go past 11. I raised you 22. And
Mhm.
so I was having so much cereal, so much toast, so much bread, so much pasta. Everything was just carbohydrate.
Yes.
Because in my mind, I was like, I have to stay away from fat. We had country crock growing up. We didn't have butter. We
Mhm.
had country crock. And so everything, and it's funny because it says crock in the title, but it
They were
is a
trying to
crock.
tell us.
They were
They were
trying. They told us they disclaimed it. It's my fault. But there was this idea, just like you're saying, you remove the fat, even lower protein, because I don't know if you remember, but in the 90s, at least where I grew up, toward the end of the 90s, I would say, this idea of protein causes cancer was the next thing I
mm,
was hearing everywhere. So any kind of animal protein and any kind of animal fat out of the diet. So we really were
yeah.
relying on carbohydrates. And I know from having high cholesterol, from being overweight, prediabetes, cystic acne, asthma, all these things that actually at the root are from hyperglycemia, too much glucose in the blood consistently. I know when I lowered my carbohydrate intake, my cholesterol vanished, which was
Yes.
shocking to me because I truly thought fat, equal cholesterol.
Yeah.
But then I would learn that a lot of glucose equals a lot of insulin, which equals a lot of triglycerides, and that's what actually clogs your arteries and creates these issues with cholesterol, not fat itself.
Hmm.
So when I went into nutrition, I first started working with lots of people who had high cholesterol, and one by one, I would watch as they removed refined carbs from their diet, their cholesterol plummeted. Not like in years, in a couple of weeks. It was incredible. So I started seeing this difference. But I wanted to say that because part of why I celebrate this pyramid, and I would totally design it differently as well with the vegetables at the bottom too.
Hmm.
I would want vegetables to be present before animal protein,
Right. Me too.
just because
Yeah.
we don't think of them as easily. But as that
Mhm.
as a base to your meal is very important for a lot of reasons, like fiber, micronutrients, and toxins. So many things you don't get from animal protein. But the reason why I love it is this new pyramid will prevent illness that comes from excess glucose. That's one thing
Mhm.
I can look at it very specifically and say. Now, people are saying, well, the people who designed it, they're bought by the meat and
Yes.
dairy industry. Very possible. I don't know
Yes.
how you do anything in the government without being bought by something at this point, but it's still a step in the right direction. It's a titration out of this old 30-year mythology of carbs at the center, and it's going into a new direction. So I'm behind it for that reason right now.
Yeah. And to that point, I agree with you. Could big meat be behind the new pyramid? Absolutely. But like you were saying, I don't think that negates the fact that there is that, at least in my opinion, fat in animal products doesn't have to be the end all be all to solving whatever health issue that you may be experiencing. The other thing that I'm surprised nobody is acknowledging or speaking to is that there's a big difference between different types of meat products, between like the factory farmed corn fed meat or animal products versus pasture raised, grass fed meat. That's going to have a different impact on your body. But we don't really make a distinction between the two when talking about the effects of it on the body.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that for a moment before we go into the beans discussion and the actual guidelines, just to kind of teach
Mm,
people what's really happening. Uh, I want everyone to think about when you think about an animal product, you think about a piece of steak, a hamburger, a chicken breast, eggs, salmon, anything you eat that's from an animal. I want everyone to think of that product being the result of the animal's environment. So it's not an isolated product like a bag of chips on the shelf. It's something that came from a certain environment. So if you're eating, let's say, grass-fed pasture-raised beef, you're having a steak that's grass-fed pasture-raised, you're eating sunlight and fresh air and wild herbs and grasses and clean water and movement. You're actually eating the experience that cow had while living that's stored in its flesh. It's a very magical thing, the way I like to see it. But I like to say you're eating the meadow, when it's a pasture-raised animal. There's so much complexity in the meadow. There's wild nutrients, there's good bacteria, there's less stress, there's much more happiness hormones. Like there's so much happening in that cow's body that you then ingest. But just like you said, to your point, when you're eating a factory farmed piece of beef or steak, you're eating GMO corn, you're eating antibiotics, you're eating growth hormones, you're eating lots of stress, that bacteria you don't want in your body, and really high amounts of omega-6 fats. So we get this question a lot when we do our food groups. And the question is always, well, I thought fat was bad if I eat
right.
a fatty steak, or I thought saturated fat was bad, or the fat in an egg. Isn't that bad for my cholesterol? With animal fat, it's not like avocado fat. Avocado fat is avocado fat. Cashew fat is cashew fat. Animal fat is all based on the animal's lifestyle. So if it is a grass-fed, pasture-raised, either organic or chemical hormone-free animal that was raised, that fat is high in omega-3s. It's actually an anti-inflammatory fat that thins your blood and can prevent clots and clogged arteries and cholesterol issues. Actually, it's good for your liver and your skin and your hormones. Whereas if that fat is a farmed burger or a factory farmed, I should say, industrial raised cow or cattle, those fats are very high on omega-6 and 9. So they can clog your arteries, they can thicken your blood, they can drive up blood pressure, they're harder on the liver, and they're very inflammatory. So you can't even say fat as a broad statement when it comes to the animal kingdom unless you know how it was raised because it impacts it.
Right. And that's what I think that's so important because right now, at least the conversation I'm seeing when it comes to fat is unsaturated versus saturated. Like that's the unsaturated is good, saturated is bad. Where I feel like the conversation is missing exactly what you just described, more so for me anyway, than unsaturated versus saturated. I want to know about how it's raised. Even if we just break it down, is it more omega-3 versus
Mhm.
omega-6? Like that's more important to me. Um, and and sort of sticking with that idea of fat, another thing I did notice in some of the reactions to the new pyramid was the prioritization, quote unquote, the prioritization of animal products. But there's nuance. Like if you actually look through the PDF, like it said, like when it comes to cooking with fat, we would recommend that you prioritize olive oil and avocado oil. If you want something else, we would recommend butter or beef tallow. And to me, again, that makes sense as opposed to
Mhm.
using margarine. So yes, they're saying prioritize. Ideally, it would be olive oil. It would be avocado oil. But in lieu of that, yeah, maybe beef tallow, maybe butter. And then as we're just talking, ideally beef tallow or butter that's been organically raised, pasture raised.
That's right. And I think what's so important about that is the issue with America is we are so divided politically that when an idea comes in that's good for us, let's say, we can't even receive it unless it's from, quote, our side. And
Mm,
I think, to
yeah.
break the division in America, we have to individually be really unbiased in looking at something first, reacting based on our true felt sense of the situation, then attaching it to a group if you even need to do that. Because this is something where people will deprive themselves of knowledge that could better them in rebellion against a certain political party when there's nothing political about eating. I mean, obviously there is, but in your own body, it's very what's more to me decolonial, indigenous, somatic than truly how your body relates to food and real food. It's funny they're calling it the real food pyramid. To me,
Yes.
it's a step in even that direction that the political left could get behind because eventually you can undo a lot of systems that harm people, especially people of color. I mean, if you look at the risk for Latino and Black Americans, they are the as a population, they what's the word? Depend, not all, of course, but a high majority
Yeah,
depend
higher
on
proportion.
food stamps. Yeah, a higher portion than whites in this country. What do you think food stamps go to? Food stamps go to the 6 to 11 servings of carbohydrates from those companies. So
Hmm.
if this real pyramid is actually adopted by companies and the government and institutions, their food stamps actually start going to actual food. That would trickle down and help people in poverty as well.
It would, and even like a personal SNAP benefits right now. It's interesting how those the SNAP benefits apply to skim milk, but not whole milk,
There you go.
which is fascinating because it's still based on that 1992 pyramid with the misdirection or misinformation that skim milk is going to be better for you because it has less fat, whereas interestingly enough, you're actually more likely to get a glucose spike from skim milk than you are whole milk, which continues to perpetuate the diabetic and all these other metabolic issues. And so, yeah, I think this is an important shift for a lot of communities who are at higher risk for those conditions.
Couldn't agree more. And that's where the divisiveness and the political mindedness is actually working against, and I'm just saying liberal because obviously the liberals are more mad about this than Republicans that I can see, that it goes against deep liberal philosophies of wanting better access to health, wanting, better care, wanting more access to food. It actually is serving that over time. If we can all adopt this, it will help so many people. So I'm hoping people can listen to what we're saying and understand if you can go beyond the big T, Trump, if you can go beyond that for a minute and just look at this thing isolated without any ideas around
Yeah.
it, you'll see it is literally a pyramid made up of whole foods. It's a whole food pyramid that prioritizes protein, fat, and vegetables. And I'm like, yeah, that's literally the cure right there for diabetes
Mhm.
and so many metabolic issues right there.
And one other thing, I'll just say that's been interesting for me to notice, and some of the pushback to it was exactly what you said. Not the prioritization of whole foods, but the fact that they're talking about avoiding ultra processed foods, which in theory you think we could all get behind. But then there are people saying, well, we don't have a definition for what an ultra processed food is. And I'm like, oh, okay. But you don't know what an ultra process and I get it. We have to have definitions for like mass production and if you're doing scientific studies, like is a Cheeto a mass an ultra processed food? Maybe is a donut like where does olive oil is that minimally
Mhm.
processed? And so yeah, we have to come up with some definition for studies and guidelines. I hear you, and let's use just a little bit of common sense. Like,
Ah!
you know what an ultra processed food is? Come on.
You have the
It's
shade face right now. The shade face is coming out. Yeah, and you're right. And that what again, this is the cognitive dissonance. This is why politics aren't useful for us as a society, because being politically minded is not useful because uh, the same people that I have seen and I was getting their feedback are the people that very much are against billion-dollar companies taking over
Mhm.
things. And I'm like, do you realize how ultra-processed food is it's to me one of the most I would say it, and I'm curious what you think about this. I think it is currently in our current day one of the strongest systems of oppression is
Mm.
ultra-processed food because it's advertised to kids. It is handed over to low-income communities. There is misinformation, so people don't know what to do with their health, and it impacts people's cognitive abilities. Their literal mental health is impacted from age 3 onward because these foods are deemed healthy for them and safe. So
Yeah.
I don't see how we can be for justice and liberation for low-income people, certain communities, in even to liberate ourselves from the grips of corporations, yet say, I want my ultra-processed food. How dare you say this isn't good for me? What do you think that's about?
Like you said, I think it sort of goes to the cognitive dissonance of, oh, I don't like you. I have to not agree with you, even if what you say, maybe I actually do agree with, or it may benefit me in my community. I think there's that part of it. And then also in the conversation with the ultra processed food, and this was actually even before this pyramid came out, we got this kind of backlash happened with Michelle Obama's My Plate, and Canada actually had a very similar My Plate, except the cup wasn't dairy, it was just water. But the pushback was that how dare you say half the plate should be fruits and vegetables? People can't afford that. That is so misguided, that you are so removed from the mainstream to think that half of a person's plate could be fruits and vegetables. And again, I had to pause. And this is probably, people are gonna say, well, this is where your privilege is showing, Camille. Okay, maybe. In my experience, are ultra processed foods cheaper to buy? Sure, I can buy maybe like 50 bags of chips for $3 and feed my kids for 2 weeks on them. But if I switch to things like apples, bananas, strawberries, it does cost a little bit more. And I mean it, like it's not as significant
Hmm.
as sometimes we make it. Sometimes, and this is, I guess this is where maybe my conspiracy theory is coming in. Like, is it just, are they trying to make us think fruits and vegetables are too expensive? Like, we just can't do it. Like, I shouldn't even conceive of it as an option. Like, just try it. Try
Yeah.
buying lettuce instead of the box container of rice. For see how much more expensive it actually is for you. And the other thing I will acknowledge, that in addition to money, there is the time. So if I'm buying ultra processed foods, I can shop once, maybe even every other week. And that's some time savings. I will say, by buying fresh food, I'm now having to shop twice a week. That is a truth.
Yep.
And it's something that I've been able to fit into my life, because for me, the benefit outweighs the fact that I now have to shop twice a week as opposed to once a week.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much there. I don't think it's your privilege. So I have a belief, and this is a present day, 2026 belief. Maybe 20 years ago I thought differently. I don't think it's about access anymore, even though that's the kind of mainstream opinion about the underprivileged in America is they don't have access.
Hmm.
I reject that. They don't have education. I
Hmm.
think the privilege is actually understanding food. And once you've been educated in how to prepare something, how to make something, how if you look at that plate and you see a little bit of broccoli with some salmon and some beans, your mind says that's not enough food. Like teaching people how actually
Ah,
that
yes.
increases GLP-1s and increases your satiety hormones and helps you have this helps you need less food because you're actually more nourished compared to when you have a bunch of refined carbohydrates, there's more of it. So your mind says, I have more for my family. Understandably, I grew up like you grew up. That's how we all thought. But
Hmm.
you're actually less nourished. You have more calories, but less micronutrients, and you have less GLP-1 being created. So your hormones that tell you you're full and you've had enough, they never kick in. So you're constantly looking for more. So people who rely on, let's say, more affordable ultra processed foods, and that's really the whole justification behind the whole food industry is
Yes.
we're trying to make it affordable and accessible, and something sits on a shelf for 2 years and doesn't go bad versus fruits that go bad in a week.
Right.
And yeah, and they're right, it's true, it really does last longer and it is a bit cheaper, but the effect in your body isn't cheaper. You have to go to more doctors.
Mm-mm.
You have to spend more money on appointments, take time off work when you get sick. You have to spend money on your medication. You have to try to deal with insurance companies. And just like you said, that the financial difference actually isn't as big as you think when you do the math. My upcoming book, Food Therapy, is a comprehensive guide that teaches you how to navigate anxiety, stress, and trauma through nutrition and somatics. It comes out on April 28th, And if you pre-order it right now, you can get a free ticket to my exclusive workshops where I will teach you how to use the methods in this book and even answer your questions live. Okay, back to the episode. I actually have this in my book, the food therapy book coming out. I have a whole chapter on this, and I even break down specific things using Amazon so everyone can go online and see it. That you can buy a thing of Cheetos or Cheez-Its, and you can buy Ezekiel bread with almond butter. And Ezekiel bread with almond butter is like wildly more expensive than the Cheez-Its. But when you break down the caloric intake, the nutrition, how much you get when you actually follow the serving size of it, it lasts just as long. And I think it comes down to like $1 something a day for this snack that's really good for your hormones and your metabolism and your health versus a snack that might be the same or a little less, like 20 cents less, but causes all the other issues. And this happened to me in real time when I was living in Brooklyn. I was living in absolute poverty at the time. And I had a coworker. We lived in the same low income neighborhood, and we both worked at this soft serve company that made ice cream out of fruit puree. So it was called Soft Serve Fruit and Company. And we were both food prep people. So we'd be upstairs talking, prepping the food. And I remember I came to work with rice, beans, and I want to say maybe sweet potato. I can't remember, but it was very simple. It was like a little casserole. And he went out for lunch and came back. And I said, "What'd you have for lunch?" And he said, "Shitty McDonald's." And I said, "Well, then why'd you eat it?" He's like, "I can't afford what you eat." And I said, "How much was your quarter pounder?" He was like, "$8, $9." And I said, "This meal cost me $5 and gives me 5 servings. So it's literally $1 a meal." And it was that moment of I'm eating whole foods. They're actually way cheaper when you know how to work with them and how to prepare them than him going, he spent $50 a week on lunch at McDonald's, thinking because he was poor, he had no other choice. I was saving money, and we were both making the same amount of money and both very poor.
Yes. Can we get back to the days when mom used to say, we got McDonald's at home? Or we don't have McDonald's money. Like
Yes, please. Yes, I don't have McDonald's money. That's a lot of money. I'm
it's a lot
shocked.
of money.
Yeah, how much money but you're told that it's expensive, like you said, to eat fruit or vegetables. So
Mhm.
is the education piece. And that's again why I'm excited about this food pyramid, because people will now be educated on a new science, going back to what you said. Someone in our membership said this, and I heard a scientist say this yesterday. Reject the phrase believe science. Reject it.
Ooh.
Because it's become a political thing. Believe science to kind of state something, regardless of what it's about, a vaccine or abortion or a mask. But you're never supposed to believe science. Science is meant to be constantly questioned and looked over, and curiosity engaged in it, and humility of, okay, are you sure? There's always an are you sure with science.
Mhm.
And you were saying this earlier about studies with fat.
Yeah.
People don't tell you who they're studied on. So they'll say fat was shown to increase, bad cholesterol. In who?
And
In
who?
women
Yeah.
60 plus, in 45-year-old men that don't move,
And
like
rats.
in rat, yeah, for real, in rats.
Mhm.
But when you look at the actual studies, you realize this does not apply to the majority of human beings. So
Mhm.
you want to always question the science, not just believe it. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that before we go into this beans thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I always just go back to there was a time when science said the earth was flat. Most of us, not all of us, but most of us now know that's not true. And that's not to say science is bad. There was a time where to believe the earth was round, that was witchcraft.
Uh-huh.
That was you were left field. And so to your point, science is always evolving. It is not this in my opinion, is not this stake in the ground that just stays the same. We have seen information change over time, which in my opinion is supposed to do. We do the best we can with the information we have at the time.
Yep.
And ideally, we're continuously getting more and more information. And sometimes I feel that individual practitioners or industries at large, there's a bit of hubris. There's this thing that I said, well, no, I can't say that I or we were wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's not about being wrong. It's that we did the best we could with the information we did at the time. Now we have more information and our perspectives have shifted.
Yes, and I think it's what's so important because I used to listen to this podcast with a bunch of indigenous elders, and they would say, indigenous people invented what we now call science, which was you observe something, you see the result, and when you
Right.
observe it like 1,000 times in a row, you realize, oh, this is something we can rely on, and then that goes into the tribe, that goes into the lineage, and for hundreds of thousands of years how humans survive because they saw something, they saw the result, and they realized, oh, this equals this. But they were always curious, well, if we move to another place, what's that going to be like? And
Hmm.
in wintertime, is it still the same thing? And what about when you're an 80-year-old woman? Like, it's always a different cycle, even within the bodies that have found these tried and true methods. So I was bringing up the science piece because this new science, currently where we are, is teaching us the opposite of what we thought 30, 40 years ago.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we're going to rest here and this is the be all end all. It's just a constant evolution to trying to get to some sense of the truth of our bodies and what helps them. And I can get down with that. The only thing on this pyramid, and we'll go into the protein beans thing, the only thing that doesn't jive with me is the dairy. And
Hmm.
the reason why is I've never experienced dairy as a necessity in anybody.
Right.
Just as a nutritionist, I don't believe it's a necessity, but as someone practiced clinically with so many people, I've only seen positive benefits come from removing or reducing dairy. I've never seen positive benefits come from increasing it. Only caveat I'd add is raw dairy. There is a magic to that depending on where you get it and what your body can process.
Mhm. I felt that was interesting too. I mean, personally, I'm not, I do consume dairy, I'll say dairy products. I'm actually not a big milk drinker, but butter, heavy cream are usually are things that I'll ingest and work well with my body, particularly depending on the time of year. But what I found what was really interesting in terms of some people, their opposition to the dairy, it was, but whole milk, whole fat milk. No, that's fat. There's the saturated fat. And I'm like, but what about the lactose? What about the casein? And like, oh, you don't have a problem with that. And so like, even those
Mhm.
nuances, I thought were really interesting.
I want to highlight what you're saying, people that don't know why you're saying that.
Oh yeah.
Because what a lot of people don't understand is a glass of skim milk is like a glass of juice. It can have 12, sometimes even 15 grams of sugar in it because milk naturally has sugar called lactose. It's just a natural sugar molecule in milk. When you skim milk, you remove the fat from it, or even 2% reduce. And when you pull that fat away, you increase the amount of lactose per serving. So you're actually having glucose spikes. Your body is responding to that milk, which we see as like a healthy fat or protein. I guess in this case, protein. We see it as this nutritious protein drink. It's actually increasing glucose, which is increasing insulin. So it can cause you to gain weight. It can cause inflammation. It can cause prediabetes and even diabetes to occur. So the reason why Camille is saying that is because when you have full fat milk, you cut the lactose almost in half, and when it's bound to the fat, it doesn't spike your glucose the same way. And don't believe me, get a glucose monitor. They are incredible, and they are not that expensive for a one-time use. And some are 150, some are $200. You buy it once, and you can put it on your arm for 2 weeks, and you will have personal data of what these things do to you. And people are amazed when they drink skim milk, and then when they drink whole milk, and there's barely a spike. They're like, I had no idea I was getting all this sugar. No, you wouldn't because you've been told that the fat is the worst thing in the milk. The fat is
Right.
one of the best properties in the milk for getting all the nutrients and feeding your brain and balancing glucose levels. So that's why Camille said that. I just wanted to give context. But the main beef people are having with me, beef, pun intended, is that there's been some public discourse around HHS. I don't know if it's specifically RFK Jr. or not, but HHS saying beans are a lower form of protein and saying animal protein is a higher form. And I want to break this down for people. Again, this
Mhm.
is why I don't like the news because it's just trying to rage bait everybody. If you go to the guidelines, first of all, which I'm looking at right now, what's listed in the protein foods column? Beans. Oh, and what amount? Half a cup of beans.
Oh
So
my God, that sounds real familiar.
girl. So thank you, Karen Hurd. Thank you, Unique Hammond. Thank you, Luis and Camille at the Quiet Diet at HLN. So, half a cup of beans is what we have been suggesting to people for a long time. When I was macrobiotic in 2010, is when I started studying the macrobiotic diet, I would have half to a whole cup of beans in my meals. And I started offering that to clients and seeing so many shifts. And then when I met Karen, she really cemented it 6 years ago. Like, this is why this is working for your clients. So HHS is recommending half a cup of beans as a protein source, everybody. Very important to understand. They're even recommending nuts and seeds or nut and seed butter. So this is actually a plant inclusive pyramid. They're
It
just not
is.
showing that visually. I'm talking
Visual.
about.
That's the part I can tell. And this isn't a bad thing, but I could tell when people are responding just to the visual, and you're just seeing that the beans and the nuts are so far lower than the red meat and the eggs. And yeah, in one respect, I get it, the importance of marketing and the message you're sending. This is what most people are going to respond to anyway. Yes. And
Mhm.
you, person who's very upset, you could also take 2 extra seconds to read the PDF.
Yes. So everyone, we're going to link the actual PDF to this episode so you can see yourself. 'Cause it's just non-controversial when you look at it. It's very simple. Whole grains are even included here.
Yeah, they
So I'm
are.
gonna they're included. So I'm gonna just go down the list so people can understand how this works. So this is made based on your daily calorie intake and what you need. Now, anyone that knows me knows I never even think about calories unless I'm educating about calories, but I don't ever go by this. But this is what dietitians use. This is the standard, the gold standard are calories. Why I'm not a dietitian, no shade, but the gold standard is calories nonetheless. That's the reality we live in, Camille. It's the waters we swim in, we just got to deal with it. So if you look at this PDF, you will see there's different columns, and each column is organized based on caloric intake. So right now, the average American eats 3,000 calories a day. So if I go, yep. So if I go to this 3,000 calorie and I go down, that will tell you if 3,000 calories is what you eat or depend on, how much you're supposed to have. So it says 4 to 5 servings of protein foods. That means 4 to 5 servings of anything in this list: meat, eggs, half cup of beans, an ounce of nuts, or 2 tablespoons of nut or seed butter. That is pretty good advice, actually. That's what I would use if I had someone, that says I need more food. But I want to zero in on something before I go to the next tab. The meat serving they're recommending is 3 ounces. I want everyone to take that in. That's very important. When you look at this pyramid, you see a whole ass chicken, and you see like a steak the size of my face. They are
That's a
not
nice porterhouse up there. Yeah.
they are not recommending you sit down and eat a whole ass chicken or a steak the size of my face.
And I will just say, I will sit down and eat a 16-ounce porterhouse. Just
Grass fed, grass fed at this
grass
point, yeah,
fed.
right? At this point. So yes, and that's fine. Do what you want. But it's so good for people who are getting concerned, thinking this is about big beef. 3 ounces is
Right.
not a big beef thing. If
Right.
everyone looks at their hand, most of you, 3 ounces is smaller than the palm of your hand. Most palms are 4 to 5 ounces when it comes to a piece of animal protein. So you're talking two-thirds of the size of your palm, maybe the size of your palm, depending it's a little smaller of a palm, of meat 3 times a day with a couple tablespoons of nuts with a half cup of beans. And that's your protein intake for the day. That is very non-controversial. Then you go down to dairy. This is my only controversy. I don't think people need
Right.
servings of dairy, but if they're going to include it, they have here a cup of milk, 3/4 of a cup of yogurt, an ounce of cheese. An ounce of cheese, everybody. That is a small amount of cheese. Most people sit down and have 4, 5, 6 ounces in a serving. An ounce of cheese is, again, look at your palm, maybe a third of your palm, a little stick there of cheese once a day. That's not that bad. Then it goes to vegetables. 4 3/4 of a cup of raw or cooked greens or 2 cups of leafy greens. So that comes down to 8 cups of salad a day for someone who needs 3,000 calories. That's actually quite planned forward when you think about it. That goes to what you and I were saying, where we would want vegetables at the base. If you
Hmm.
visualize 8 cups of salad, that is a huge amount of vegetables with 9 ounces of, chicken for the whole day. That's a very small portion. So not bad at all again. Fruits, they're saying 2.5 servings of 1 cup of raw or half cup of dried. Absolutely in range of what I usually recommend because of the glucose and the fructose. And then whole grains are saying you can have up to 3.5 servings of a half cup of oats, brown rice, barley, quinoa, buckwheat, or a slice of bread or one tortilla. That's really sound advice because the old pyramid, we used to always upset me about it. It didn't say grains. It said
Hmm.
cereal products, where they're actually recommending whole grains. And they go to a slice of bread or tortilla if you want a refined carbohydrate, but just one. And then healthy fats, a teaspoon of olive oil or butter. They're saying you have up to 7 teaspoons of that a day if you need the 3,000 calories. So to me, this is extremely sound advice. And it's literally what I've been going off of for the last almost 20 years with people. minus the dairy. And I would make sure that people always included beans as a protein. I think it's important to see beans as a very diverse food. It's a protein, it's a carb, it's a fiber. It's kind
Yeah.
of a vegetable, it's kind of a meat, it's many different things. But the last thing else, actually, what's your response to just even hearing the breakdown before I go forward?
Yeah, I mean, to me, again, the breakdown, it makes sense. In fact, I'd be curious if there's like a graphic designer out there who would design the pyramid based on like the numbers
Yes.
you just read out, and how that might sit with people, but people are still going to be upset. But one thing I will say, around some of the again some of the feedback to it has been two things. One, the increase in the recommendation of protein, so going up to like 1.2, I think, to potentially 1.6 grams per kilogram. um, and yeah, that could be a lot. And maybe you individual don't need a lot. In fact, when I think about my ideal weight, I don't need that much protein. But again, these are guidelines, just like
Hold on, pause
anything.
there, because you've said that before and it's very important.
Mhm.
Explain to people what it means, because some people will, let's say someone weighs 250 pounds,
Mhm.
but they need to be 180 to reverse health conditions.
Yeah.
A lot of people will actually go off of 250, but
Yeah.
can you just speak to that? It's an important piece.
Yeah, yeah, happy to talk about that. Yeah, oftentimes when we get protein recommendations, we can either be told or just interpret, I need 1 gram per kilogram, which is about like half a gram to a pound, just to convert it. Um, but usually people use the weight they're currently at. But what you want to use is your ideal weight. So whether it's that you want to be a little bit less or a little bit more, that's going to determine how much protein you need. So whether, regardless of if I'm 150 pounds, if my goal is to get to 125 pounds, my protein intake is going to be different than if my goal is to get to 175 pounds, even though we may both weigh 150 at that time.
It's brilliant nuance, because the only time that this applies where you're at a higher weight and you need to eat for that is a bodybuilder.
Mhm.
People that are like, I do not want to lose my muscle, I want to stay at 250. Then yes, you have to maintain that much protein. But the
Mhm.
average person does not need to maintain that much protein.
No, they don't. And so when people, some of the feedback has been like, this is so much protein that they're encouraging you to eat. Well, no, most of us actually need to lose a little weight. If we're looking at the epidemic that most of the Western world is experiencing. And it may actually be in alignment, or it may not seem as much as you may think. But even with my ideal weight, or the data weight I'd like to get to, I was like, oh, that's still a little much, or it seems a little much to me. I'm gonna play with it a little bit, and so I think we also need to think of these as guidelines, because
Mhm.
that's what they are. Um, and that means we still have to have our own individual um, experience, in our own individual perspective, as just a regular schmegular person, and also as a practitioner, because I've heard that some of the feedback is like, well, this isn't prescriptive enough. Like, we need to know exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And to me, that's very dissociative.
Doesn't
It's
make sense.
very transactional, and not everybody is going to be the same thing. That I need to have a relationship with my body. You practitioner, yeah, you're going to have a relationship with the individual client sitting in front of you. You can't just look at every person you see every day and say, hey, this is how many grams of protein you need to have every day, because it's not going to be the same. It
I
can't.
couldn't agree more. It's one of my favorite things actually about my book coming out when I think about interviews and going on tour around it. It's that I'm so excited to kind of put some kind of, I don't know, wedge between this idea that there's just one way, and if you do this, this is going to happen.
Right.
Everybody is so diverse. I mean, we're ancestrally diverse, we're emotionally diverse, we have our own history and health, we have our own lifestyle every day of what our bodies demand. I mean, for me as a 38-year-old man, it's going to have a way different relationship to food than a 20-year-old man
Hmm.
or a 65-year-old woman, or like a 4-year-old. So
Right.
I don't believe in these standards, even calorically. I'm really interested in individual needs and tracking your body to see how it feels. And I learned this a lot from tribes. You know, if you research and study different current day, present day indigenous tribes, particularly in Africa, they get a third of the protein we get, and they live way longer and have incredible bodies, lean muscle, no bone issues, no cancer. So it's not that easy, is what I'm saying. It's not as simple to say this is going to equal this. It's like
Oh
you said, it's
yeah.
a guideline.
Yeah. And I love that because we can look at even if we even outside of protein, if we look at let's go back to grains, let's go back to white rice and it's like well, white rice is it's produced or it's processed and it has this effect in the body. Well, there's also several countries, particularly within Asia, who eat a lot of white rice, and we don't see the same levels of metabolic disease. So, yeah, there's something else going on. But how interestingly, or somewhat interestingly enough, is we are actually starting to see an increase in metabolic disease in those countries, even though they've been eating white rice for centuries upon centuries. So, what's being introduced now?
Mhm.
Spoiler alert, ultra processed food.
That's right. That's right. I thought about that a lot because when I was studying macrobiotics, I would find that Asian communities and countries and cultures ate so much white rice.
Mm-hmm.
They also intermittent fast. They usually don't eat
Yes.
breakfast. So there's all these things in place that would balance out the white rice because it's ancient for their culture. They know what to do with it. They have their way. But you bring ultra processed foods to any godlike people, they all come out with the same disease. It's one of the things that's almost true for everybody. There's a couple unicorns out there like 115-year-olds. You say, well, what's your favorite meal? They're like KFC every day. You know,
Yeah.
there's always the
And a
mystery
shot of
body.
whiskey.
Yeah, a shot of whiskey and some fries. But for the most part, you can bet your ass if you're eating ultra processed foods, you're going to mess with your genes and your metabolism.
Mhm.
The last tiny thing I want to say is we have to close, and I have a lot of, I think I have several, but I know I have one podcast on this around protein. I just wanted to speak to the confusion around HHS denouncing beans because there were articles that, oh my God, people were sending me en masse that were saying
Oh, wow,
HHS says,
really?
yeah, says beans are not a protein source. That's actually not true. What they said, and this is what I agree with too, they aren't a complete protein
Mhm.
source. They're not an efficient protein source. Now, I want everyone to understand what efficient and complete means. You need 9 amino acids that your body will not make so your whole system can function. Your brain, your bones, your tissue, everything needs to function from these 9 amino acids. If you're getting them from your foods, your body will make all the other ones. A complete protein is one that has all 9 amino acids in it. So if I eat rice, it has some, and the beans have some. So I put rice and beans together on my plate. Now I have the 9 amino acids on that plate. So when you're vegan or vegetarian, you depend on plant protein. You need to eat a little more than you would have to eat when you're eating animals, and you have to have a diverse range so you're getting all those amino acids. So they are factually less efficient and incomplete, not judgmentally.
Right.
Factually, they are. Whereas if I have a little palm size of chicken, I'm going to get 3 to 4 times the amino acids and protein without any of the carbohydrates and without an increase in calories. So if you have glucose sensitivity, if you're trying to lower glucose, you're trying to lose weight, switching to more animal protein will be more efficient and effective for your body than plant protein can be. And again, it depends on each body. I know people that into their 60s are vegan. They are thriving.
Yep.
And people like me, at 33 years old, I stopped thriving and I had to eat meat. So I want everyone to understand efficient and complete is not a judgment. It's not them throwing shade at beans. It's actually nutritionally a fact that plant proteins are incomplete. There's a list of a couple. You can look them up. I know hemp seeds are one. Soy is another one. There's a couple that are complete, but very, very few are. So I just wanted to end with that so you can understand why these articles, though rooted in a sense of truth, were spun to make it sound like they hate plants, because that's actually not what's coming up. And if you look at the guidelines, they're right there, right after egg. This third thing are beans. So I think that's a proper list of protein sources, and then nuts, because you're going to get the most protein from those in a row. Well, that was fun. Any final words?
Um, if I would, I'll just reiterate something you brought up earlier that if you're someone out there who may have seen the pyramid, the new pyramid, and you're like, fuck that shit, just experiment, see what it's like to go back to the pyramid outside of the idea of whose administration it's come out under. What is it like just to sit with the information that's being presented. And remember, I'm not even saying this is about you needing to agree with all of it. What is it like just to sit with it outside of the bias of this is coming out under a particular administration, so I can't like it or I can't take it seriously?
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for that, Camille. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see what comes up next time. Bye. Thank you for watching today's episode. Please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. I have developed a 4-week self-paced course that takes 18 years of my personal and professional experience and puts it into one place where you can easily and quickly learn the foundations of recovering from stress and trauma. How does the food you eat affect your stress levels? How do the relationships in your life create stress or peace? How does the relationship you have with your body allow you to feel happier and more settled? I will cover all this and so much more in this 4-week self-paced course. And the best part, it's self-paced. You don't have to sign up at a certain date or finish it at a certain time. It's yours for life, and it's waiting there for you when you're ready to finish it. Throughout this course, I'll be teaching you philosophies and practices that combine my 3 favorite modalities: somatic experiencing, embodied parts work, and nutrition. For more information on this course, click on the link in my episode details. On September 6th, I am leading the most majestic retreat I have ever led to date. I will be flying myself and my entire team over to the UK at the enchanted Broughton Sanctuary, a 3,000-acre retreat center that's currently being rewilded with native plants and trees to restore it to its indigenous roots. And I'm hosting a retreat called Finding Safety in Yourself and Others Through the Land. Anyone who joins gets to experience a week of learning from me and my team, in addition to demos, collective somatic ceremonies, lectures, delicious bean-based meals, and deep connection time with this special, special land. Our classroom is a portal to pleasure called Avalon, and it includes an indoor swimming pool, sauna, steam room, hot tub, and lounge. And get this, it's all ours, completely private for the entire week. For more information, please visit holisticlifenavigation.com and click on events, or check out the link in the episode details. Spots are limited, so make sure to reserve yours now. Listen, do you hear something? That's the sound of warm, delicious, glorious Costa Rica. And this is where I am headed next. On February 28th, I'm hosting a week-long retreat at the stunning Blue Spirit Retreat Center, and it's going to focus on recovering from emotional eating and people-pleasing by finding safety within. And there's truly not a better place for me to teach this than Blue Spirit. Blue Spirit has created a literal sanctuary for wildlife, native plants, and people who are lucky enough to retreat there. Picture a vibrant jungle canopy atop a hill with a saltwater infinity pool, yoga classes, next-level local cuisine, and beautiful views of the land and sea. Not to mention the very special, magical experience of wading in the saltwater pool while a crew of little baby monkeys rests on the branches above you. Your room is situated just minutes from the most beautiful ocean I've ever met, with tide pools featuring everything from blue octopus to starfish and a rainbow variety of tropical fish. And yes, I will be personally introducing you to each and every one of them. So let's go into the retreat itself. I'll be joined by my dear friends Zach and Camille as we teach you the art of finding safety in yourself, especially as it relates to fawning and people-pleasing and eating habits, which are all very connected. I'm going to teach you how to eat to recover from stress and trauma, how to use food cravings as a compass for unmet needs, how to tend to your capacity for being seen and being uncomfortable so you can stop fawning so much, and how to embody and ground big emotions and sensations that arise in your body. It's an easy flight to the airport, and Blue Spirit will manage your transportation from there. Visit holisticlifenavigation.com and click on events for more information, or click on the link in the episode details. We will be waiting for you on the other side in glorious, warm, vibrant Costa Rica.